A millionaire takes his fiancée to a lavish dinner, cherishing their moment together. But the evening turns tense when his ex-fiancée appears unexpectedly, her arrival dripping with unspoken truths, threatening to unravel the love and trust he cherishes. No one could have predicted what would unfold on that quiet afternoon in the bustling streets of California. Grace, a diligent and ambitious young woman, managed a local restaurant with unmatched dedication. Her days were a blur of work, ensuring every detail was perfect for her customers, all while bearing the weight of her family's future on her shoulders. Her younger brother was studying in a prestigious university, thanks to Grace's sacrifices and determination. Life was a constant struggle, but Grace's unwavering resolve kept her moving forward. That day, as Grace was going about her usual routine, she noticed a man standing near the restaurant. There was something familiar about him. He stepped forward, his eyes scanning her face, a flicker of recognition dawning in his expression. Grace froze as memories of her childhood suddenly rushed back. It was Daniel, her childhood friend, someone she hadn't seen in years. Daniel hesitated, unsure if it was really her. "Grace? Is that you?" he asked, his voice filled with disbelief. Grace nodded, smiling nervously. It was a moment neither of them had expected. The two began talking, initially awkward, but soon slipping into a rhythm as they reminisced about their shared past. Daniel shared that he now worked for a successful tech company, while Grace spoke about her restaurant and the challenges of supporting her family. Despite the years and the distance, there was a connection between them that couldn't be ignored. As their conversation deepened, Grace invited him to visit her restaurant properly, an offer Daniel graciously accepted. But as he left, a lingering thought stayed with Grace. Why had fate brought Daniel back into her life after all these years? Little did she know, this chance reunion would spark a series of events that would forever alter the course of their lives. That evening, as Grace closed the restaurant, she found herself lost in thought. Something about Daniel's return unsettled her, not in a bad way, but in a way that made her wonder if her carefully managed life was about to change. The answer lay just ahead, waiting to reveal itself. The next evening, as the restaurant hummed with its usual energy, Grace found herself glancing at the entrance more often than usual. She wondered if Daniel would show up. Part of her was excited, while another part couldn't shake the nervousness. Finally, the bell above the door jingled, and there he was. Daniel stepped in, his tall frame exuding confidence, yet his warm smile immediately put Grace at ease. She welcomed him warmly, ushering him to a cozy corner table. The glow of soft lights and the aroma of freshly cooked meals created an atmosphere perfect for reconnecting. Grace personally prepared some of the restaurant's best dishes and set them before him. "I hope you're hungry," she teased, sitting across from him. Daniel laughed. "I'll admit, I've been looking forward to this all day." He took a bite and raised an impressed eyebrow. "This is incredible. You've done an amazing job here, Grace." Her cheeks flushed slightly. "Thank you. It hasn't been easy, but this place is my heart and soul. It's how I support my family." Their conversation naturally shifted to their childhood. They laughed about the mischievous adventures they'd shared as kids, the time Daniel broke a neighbor's window playing baseball, or when Grace fell into a pond trying to rescue a duckling. "I can't believe how much time has passed," Daniel said, his voice softer now. "You've grown into such an extraordinary woman, Grace." She smiled but quickly deflected. "And you, working at a tech company? That's impressive. Tell me about it." Daniel leaned back, sharing stories of his work and his busy life. Yet, as he spoke, Grace sensed something in his eyes. An exhaustion, a weariness, as though the success came with its own burdens. When it was time for Daniel to leave, Grace walked him to the door. "You should visit again," she said sincerely. "I will," Daniel replied, his tone equally genuine. As he walked away, Grace couldn't help but feel that this was more than just a nostalgic encounter. Something had shifted between them, though she couldn't quite place it. The following week, Daniel visited Grace's restaurant again, this time with a bouquet of fresh daisies in hand. "For the hardest working woman I know," he said with a charming smile as he handed them to her. Grace's cheeks flushed, and she quickly placed the flowers in a vase near the counter. This time, they didn't just reminisce about the past. They delved into deeper conversations. Daniel asked about her family, her struggles, and how she managed to juggle so many responsibilities. Grace hesitated at first, but something about his earnest gaze made her open up. "My parents passed away when I was young," she began, her voice steady despite the weight of her words. "Since then, it's been my responsibility to take care of my younger brother. He's in college now, and I'm so proud of him. But keeping this place running and paying off my loans, it's a lot." Daniel listened intently, his admiration for her growing with every word. "Grace, you're incredible," he said. "Most people would crumble under that kind of pressure, but you've built something amazing here." Grace gave a small, grateful smile. "I don't think about it much. I just do what needs to be done." Daniel shared pieces of his own life as well, though his tone was lighter. He spoke about his demanding job, his travels, and his dreams for the future. But there was a vulnerability in his voice when he admitted, "Sometimes, I wonder if all this success is worth it. It feels lonely." Grace looked at him, surprised. "You? Lonely? You seem like you have everything." Daniel chuckled softly. "That's what it looks like from the outside. But inside, it's different." The evening flew by, and neither of them seemed eager to part ways. As Daniel left, Grace found herself thinking about him long after he'd gone. For Daniel, the feeling was mutual. Walking back to his car, he couldn't stop replaying her words, her smile, and the strength that radiated from her. He realized something had shifted within him. This wasn't just about reconnecting with an old friend. As the days turned into weeks, Daniel and Grace found themselves meeting more frequently. Sometimes it was at her restaurant, where they'd talk late into the evening after closing hours. Other times, Daniel would surprise her with coffee during her breaks, effortlessly becoming a part of her routine. Grace couldn't deny how comfortable she felt around him. He had a way of making her laugh, of easing the weight she carried, even if just for a little while. For Daniel, every moment with Grace was a reprieve from his demanding world of boardrooms and tech innovations. One evening, after the restaurant had quieted down, Daniel brought up a question that had been on his mind. "Grace, you've been so open with me about your life. Can I ask, what keeps you going? Through all the challenges?" Grace paused, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. "My brother," she said simply. "He deserves a chance at a better life. Every late night, every struggle, it's worth it when I see him succeed." Her sincerity struck Daniel deeply. "You're amazing, you know that?" he said, leaning forward slightly. "You deserve someone to share the weight with." Grace laughed softly, brushing off the compliment. "I've managed this far, but thank you, Daniel. That means a lot." The conversation turned lighter, drifting to their childhood memories again. Daniel couldn't help but bring up an old story. "Do you remember the time you tried to make a kite out of a bedsheet and sticks?" Grace laughed, her eyes lighting up. "And you helped me launch it. It didn't even stay in the air for 2 seconds." They both laughed, the sound echoing in the quiet restaurant. For a moment, it felt like the rest of the world disappeared. As Daniel left that night, Grace watched him go with a mix of emotions she couldn't quite define. Daniel, too, was lost in thought. He couldn't shake the feeling that Grace was unlike anyone he'd ever met. Strong, genuine, and unforgettable. Neither of them said it aloud, but the bond between them was deepening with every passing day. One evening, Daniel arrived at the restaurant with an unusual seriousness in his expression. Grace noticed immediately, her brow furrowing with concern. "Is everything all right?" she asked, leading him to his usual seat. Daniel hesitated for a moment, then spoke. "Grace, I've been thinking a lot about you, about this restaurant, and everything you've told me." Grace tilted her head, unsure where this was going. "What about it?" Daniel leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. "You've worked so hard to keep this place running, and it's more than just a business to you. It's your lifeline, your dream. I want to help you." Grace blinked, caught off guard. "Help me? What do you mean?" "I've purchased the restaurant," Daniel said, his words deliberate. "Not to take it away from you, but to secure it. You don't have to worry about loans or finances anymore. It's yours, completely, without the weight of debt." For a moment, Grace was stunned into silence. She stared at him, trying to process his words. You bought it? Why would you do that?" Daniel smiled softly. "Because I believe in you, Grace. You've poured your heart into this place, and you deserve to see it thrive without constantly struggling. You've given so much to others. Let someone give back to you." Tears welled up in Grace's eyes, but she quickly wiped them away, shaking her head. "Daniel, I can't accept this. It's too much." "It's not too much," he insisted. "It's the least I can do for someone as incredible as you." Grace's emotions warred within her. Gratitude, disbelief, and a flicker of something deeper, something she wasn't ready to name, swirled in her heart. "I don't know what to say," she finally whispered. "Just say you'll let me be a part of this journey," Daniel said. "That's all I want." Grace nodded, her voice soft but firm. "Thank you, Daniel. This means more to me than I can ever express." As he left that night, the atmosphere between them had shifted. Their bond was no longer just friendship. It was something stronger, something undeniable. Weeks passed, and the connection between Grace and Daniel grew stronger. Daniel's thoughtful gestures and constant support made Grace feel something she hadn't in years, a sense of being cared for. Though she was hesitant to admit it, her feelings for him had deepened. One evening, after the restaurant had closed, Daniel invited Grace for a walk by the nearby lake. The cool breeze carried the scent of pine, and the stars twinkled brightly above them. Grace was caught off guard by how nervous Daniel seemed. "What's going on?" she asked with a smile, glancing at him. Daniel hesitated, running a hand through his hair. "There's something I need to say, Grace. I've been thinking about this for a while." Grace stopped walking, her heart racing. She looked at him expectantly, the air thick with suspense. Daniel took a deep breath. "You're the most incredible person I've ever met. Your strength, your kindness, your resilience. It's all so inspiring. You've made me see life in a way I never thought possible. Grace, I love you. I want to build a future with you." Grace's breath hitched as Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He opened it to reveal a simple yet elegant diamond ring. "Will you marry me?" he asked, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Grace stared at the ring, her mind racing. She thought of everything they had shared, his unwavering support, and the genuine care in his eyes. A tear slid down her cheek as she nodded slowly. "Yes," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'll marry you." Daniel broke into a wide smile and slipped the ring onto her finger. He pulled her into an embrace, his heart pounding against hers. "You've just made me the happiest man alive," he said. For the first time in years, Grace allowed herself to imagine a life where she wasn't carrying the weight of the world alone. In Daniel's arms, she felt safe, loved, and hopeful. But as they walked back to the restaurant, neither could predict the storm that was about to test their love. The days following their engagement were filled with excitement. Grace and Daniel began making wedding plans, sharing their joy with friends and family. Grace's brother beamed with pride, happy to see his sister finally finding her own happiness. The restaurant flourished under Grace's guidance, and everything seemed perfect, until one fateful afternoon. Grace was at the restaurant preparing for the evening rush when a customer entered, her air of confidence immediately drawing attention. She was tall, impeccably dressed, and carried an aura of authority. Introducing herself as Mia, the woman claimed to be an old acquaintance of Daniel's. Grace, though surprised, maintained her composure. "How do you know Daniel?" she asked politely, though a flicker of unease began to creep in. Mia smiled, a hint of condescension in her expression. "We were close at one point. I was surprised to hear about his engagement. I thought you deserved to know about our history." The words hit Grace like a blow. She struggled to process what Mia was implying. "History? What do you mean?" Mia leaned in slightly, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. "Daniel and I were together for years. My father and I have been major players in his business ventures. We've been influential in his success. He might have failed to mention that to you." Grace's mind swirled with doubt and confusion. She managed to keep her voice steady. "Why are you telling me this now?" Mia's smile widened. "Because you seem like a nice girl, Grace. But Daniel isn't the man you think he is. He plays a game that only a few can understand." When Mia left, Grace sat down, her hands trembling. Her mind was flooded with questions. Why hadn't Daniel told her about Mia? Was there truth to what Mia had said? Or was it simply a cruel attempt to sabotage their happiness? That evening, Grace confronted Daniel. "Why didn't you tell me about Mia?" she asked, her voice firm despite the hurt in her eyes. Daniel froze, caught off guard. "I was going to tell you," he said, "but it's not what you think. I'll explain everything." Grace listened, but doubt had already taken root. The perfect life she'd begun to envision was starting to crack. Grace spent the night wrestling with her thoughts, replaying Mia's words and Daniel's explanations in her mind. She wanted to trust him, but a nagging sense of betrayal wouldn't let her rest. The next day, she avoided Daniel's calls, needing time to process everything. By evening, Daniel showed up at the restaurant, determined to clear the air. "Grace," he began, his tone urgent. "Please, let me explain everything. You deserve the truth." Grace crossed her arms, her expression guarded. "Then start talking, Daniel. Who is Mia to you, and why did she act like she still has a claim on you?" Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Mia and I were involved a long time ago, but it was never about love. Her father is a billionaire tycoon, and he wanted me to partner with their family business. Mia played along, pretending to care about me, but it was all for their gain. I broke it off the moment I realized their intentions." Grace narrowed her eyes. "And her claim that she and her father helped build your success?" "They didn't," Daniel said firmly. "They wanted to control my company, but I refused. They've been trying to sabotage me ever since. Mia's visit wasn't about you, Grace. It was about hurting me through you. She knows how much you mean to me." Grace stared at him, her emotions in turmoil. She wanted to believe him, but the doubt was overwhelming. "Why didn't you tell me about any of this sooner?" "I was trying to protect you," Daniel admitted, his voice softening. "I didn't want their schemes to touch you, but I see now that keeping secrets was a mistake." Tears welled up in Grace's eyes. "I need time, Daniel. I need to think about everything." Daniel nodded, his shoulders slumping. "Take all the time you need. Just know that I love you, Grace, and I'll do whatever it takes to prove it." That night, Grace packed her things and left the restaurant. She needed space, far away from the chaos. As she disappeared into the quiet streets, Daniel realized that his worst fear had come true. He might have lost her. Daniel was consumed by desperation. Days turned into weeks as he searched for Grace, reaching out to her friends, family, and anyone who might have a clue about her whereabouts. Every lead turned into a dead end, leaving him more frustrated and heartbroken. Meanwhile, Grace had retreated to a small coastal town, seeking solace in the quiet waves and fresh air. She had rented a modest apartment and taken a job at a local bakery, far removed from the life she had built. It was her way of healing, of finding clarity amidst the chaos. Back in the city, Daniel finally received a tip. A mutual acquaintance mentioned seeing someone who resembled Grace working in a bakery miles away. Daniel didn't hesitate. He cleared his schedule and set off, determined to see her again, even if it meant risking rejection. When Daniel arrived at the bakery, his heart pounded as he spotted her through the window. She looked different, her hair tied back, her face calm but distant. She didn't see him at first, too focused on arranging pastries in the display case. Summoning his courage, Daniel entered the bakery. The bell above the door chimed, and Grace turned toward the sound. The moment their eyes met, her expression shifted from surprise to guardedness. "Daniel," she said, her voice a mix of shock and hesitation. "What are you doing here?" "I had to find you," he said, stepping closer but keeping his distance. "Grace, I couldn't let things end like this. Please, hear me out." Grace hesitated before motioning for him to step outside. The two stood by the ocean breeze, the sound of waves filling the silence between them. "I've been honest with you, Grace," Daniel began. "I love you, and I've always been transparent about that. Mia's lies were meant to destroy us, but I won't let her win. You mean more to me than anything, and I'll spend the rest of my life proving that to you." Grace studied his face, searching for any sign of deceit. What she saw instead was sincerity, regret, and unwavering love. For the first time since she left, she considered the possibility of letting him back into her life. Grace stood in silence, the sound of crashing waves filling the space between them. She looked at Daniel, the man who had turned her world upside down. For weeks, she had wrestled with her emotions, trying to reconcile the love she felt with the betrayal she had experienced. "You don't understand, Daniel," Grace finally said, her voice trembling. "It's not just about Mia or her lies. It's about trust. I gave you my heart, and for a moment, I wasn't sure if I made a mistake." Daniel stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "I know, Grace, and I'll regret every second of keeping those things from you. But I swear to you, there was never anyone but you. Mia's game was never about love. It was about power, and I wanted to shield you from all of it." He pulled a folder from his bag and handed it to her. "These are the documents proving what I'm saying. Emails, contracts, everything. Mia and her father wanted to take over my company. When I ended things, they swore revenge. That's all it ever was. But I should have told you sooner, Grace. I should have trusted you to understand." Grace hesitated, flipping through the papers. Her heart sank as the truth unfolded before her. Everything Daniel had said was right. Mia's relationship with him had been a facade, a calculated ploy to destroy his business. Tears welled up in her eyes, not from pain, but from relief. "Why didn't you give up on me?" she asked softly, her voice barely audible over the waves. Daniel's gaze softened. "Because I love you, Grace. You've shown me what it means to fight for something that matters. You're my something that matters." Grace took a deep breath, letting the weight of her doubts fall away. "I believe you, Daniel," she said finally. "I just needed time to see it for myself." He stepped forward, hope lighting his face. "Does this mean—" She smiled through her tears. "Yes, Daniel. It means I'll marry you." Months later, in a ceremony by the ocean, Grace and Daniel exchanged vows. Their love had been tested, but in the end, it had prevailed. Stronger, deeper, and ready for the future ahead.